Over the last few years, I've been talking here on the channel about the threat that ARM poses for the x86-dominated PC landscape, where the duopoly of Intel and AMD CPUs has led to long periods of stagnation with only a few glimpses of innovation here and there. The move to chiplets comes to mind. For the last couple of years, I've been talking about how companies like Qualcomm and particularly Nvidia are poised to disrupt the PC market with their own ARM-based CPUs that could break the paradigm and introduce some long-awaited shifts that could be extremely beneficial for us PC enthusiasts. Well, it looks like someone didn't get the memo, and with several ARM-based launches on the horizon, specifically targeting the PC market, Intel has made the crucial mistake of underestimating its biggest threat yet.
This video is sponsored by urcdkeys.com. If you buy a retail Windows 10 key, you could spend $100 or more, but if you buy an OEM key from urcdkeys.com, a Windows 10 Pro key will cost you only $15 when you use the coupon code C25. The keys work globally, and you can even get a free upgrade to Windows 11 from Microsoft. After you've made your purchase, you will find your key in your purchased orders in the URCD Keys website. Click on Get Keys and copy the key. Then in Windows, click on Start and type Activate, and then click Activation Settings. Then click Change Product Key, paste your key you just purchased, and click Next. Your copy of Windows is now activated. If you want Office 2021 Professional, you can use the same C25 discount code and get it for just $65. URCD Keys is running a mid-year sale with some cool mechanical keyboards, gaming mice, and even gaming chairs. A big thanks to urcdkeys.com for sponsoring today's video. Check the links in the description to get your cheap OEM Windows keys today.
It's not just Qualcomm's newly announced X Elite SoC that will be setting its sights on a share of the PC market, but as I've been saying for a long while now, Nvidia have their own ARM chip destined for the PC in the works, as we'll see today. In the meantime, this last Thursday, Intel had their Q3 earnings call, and Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger told analysts during the earnings call that, and I quote, ARM and Windows client alternatives generally, they've been relegated to pretty insignificant roles in the PC business. We take all our competition seriously, but I think history is our guide here. We don't see these as potentially being all that significant overall. Well, almost 5 years ago, I made the prediction that Apple would ditch Intel and create their own ARM-based chips that would represent a huge dent in Intel's business. Not only was I correct with that prediction, but as we've seen over time, Apple has taken their company to new heights by having control over their own silicon. And like I said back then, where Apple goes, others follow. As Pat Gelsinger correctly says, history should be their guide, and history shows us that it was a crucial mistake from Intel to underestimate the allure of being free from their stagnating, bloated microarchitectures, especially in an industry in constant flux and with new workloads like AI requiring agile chip design rather than depending on Intel or AMD's overly generalized architectures that try to do everything but specialize in nothing. And if you question Apple's ridiculous prices, their borderline criminal business practices, and we'll get to that in a second, the complete lack of ethics when dealing with the repair industry and with competitors and suppliers, the OS walled garden, well, I'm with you on all of those fronts, and I would never buy an Apple product. But it's undeniable that Apple's M series of chips are excellent, delivering similar or better performance than the x86 counterparts, but with much better efficiency. In some cases, even with passively cooled chips like in the MacBook Airs, and the fixed function that's been added to the chips is catered to the experiences that Apple wants to deliver in their ecosystem. It's the way forward when it comes to heterogeneous SoCs for client devices. It seems Intel haven't learned that lesson. You might think that losing a Goliath Goliath like Apple as a customer would raise the alarm bells at Intel 5 years ago. But when your head is so stuck up your butt, I guess it becomes difficult to have a broader perspective of things. This very week, Qualcomm has revealed their X Elite chip, like I said they would, by the way, a few months ago when I covered their Orion project. If you remember, a few years ago I interviewed John Masters, who at the time was at Nvidia, and not long after that, Qualcomm acquired Nvidia for a staggering $1.4 billion, scrapped the server core, and focused on bringing Nvidia's core to the PC market. And it's finally here. The X Elite is built on TSMC 4nm, features 12 Orion CPU cores, which clock up to 3.8 GHz in 3 clusters of 4 CPUs. Disabling one cluster, if needed, can let the other 2 clusters clock one of their CPU cores up to 4.3 GHz boost, which is an interesting design decision, as you can get a dual-core 4.3 GHz for a cycle-sensitive application, or 12 cores at 3.8 GHz for a parallel workload like rendering. As far as the integrated graphics, it's an Adreno GPU with 4.6 teraflops of performance, so that's around the level of a GTX 1060 discrete GPU, but with support for the latest standards. Not bad for integrated graphics. And of course, there's a huge focus on AI performance, with Qualcomm claiming the X Elite has 2.5 times better tensor performance than existing laptops. The devices powered by the X Elite will be available mid-2024, so in about 6 to 8 months, and will focus on premium experiences. Qualcomm is saying they are not targeting high-end gaming just yet, but hinted that that would be a priority in the future. If they can get a 1060 level of GPU into an SoC, imagine what they can do when the next generation moves to chiplets, and we see several of these chiplets on a gaming-focused device. Now that will be something. Meanwhile, this Snapdragon X Elite has already been tested in 2 configurations, one at 80 watts and another at 23 watts, showing the chip can scale to different classes of devices. Both versions beat all other devices in the same classes, and the single core is far ahead enough that it should sit well in comparison to the newly announced M3 from Apple, which we'll look at next. The same for Cinebench 2024, and in multi-threaded in particular, it destroyed the equivalent competitors. The X Elite also beat the rivals in GPU benchmarks, with the exception of the Surface laptop that had a discrete RTX 4060. But that's not what the Qualcomm chip is aiming for here. We can't really compare integrated graphics to a discrete GPU, at least not yet. Now, Apple also announced the M3 series of chips, as I mentioned, also based on ARM IP. Remember when I said that the lack of ethics permeates Apple's modus operandi when it comes to business? Well, if their charts for the M3 are any indication, their goal is to deceive consumers into thinking the M3 is significantly better than the M2, which it doesn't sound like it is. Here's an example. The M3 family is 30% faster than the M2 family. At what? Apple doesn't say. At rendering? At file compression? You would think the presentation notes or fine print would clarify, but they don't. Same for GPU performance. Not only is it impossible to figure out what the exact values are here, but again, what workload is this comparing? The performance claims are so dubious and misleading that writer and YouTuber Patrick Kennedy from the popular website Serve the Home has asked for an investigation by the FTC into Apple's claims. Nevertheless, shadiness and anti-consumer practices aside, the Max variant of the chip brings hardware-accelerated ray tracing and mesh shading on the GPU side, with 40 GPU cores and 128 gigs of unified memory. That, along with 16 CPU cores, 12 performance and 4 efficient. It's a straightforward iteration on the M2, updating what was already a very efficient SoC with some of the latest tech. To put things in perspective, Apple has nearly doubled its personal computer market share since it moved to in-house chips, according to research firm IDC. So while Intel is busy refreshing the 13th gen CPUs, which were honestly already a refresh of the 12th gen, and with Meteor Lake still more than a month away on what is effectively a rebranded 7nm node, I would say Pat Gelsinger calling the ARM threat insignificant when looking at how good the competition is getting and how stagnant their own offerings are is short-sighted to say the least. Intel's only refuge is in the high-performance enthusiast niche, so that's the power-chugging desktop i9s. In every other segment, I would say there's a material threat of Intel getting owned in the near future. And that's not even when you take into account what could be Intel's greatest threat in the PC business, Nvidia. I've been long saying that Nvidia will be releasing an ARM-based CPU for the client PC. If you've been following my channel, you might remember the reasons I've listed for that move. And a recent report from Reuters seems to confirm what I've been saying. According to two Reuters sources, Nvidia has been quietly building an ARM-based chip to challenge Intel's dominance in the PC CPU business, with Microsoft aiming to create their own version of an Apple ecosystem with interconnected devices like PCs, tablets, and phones. It's no surprise that they are encouraging a push for ARM from the biggest chip makers out there, and Nvidia is a prime target. One of Reuters' sources claims that efficiency, particularly in AI tasks, is one of the key reasons for Nvidia's partnership with Microsoft in this new ARM venture. I did some digging a while back before this report came out and was trying to get confirmation on what exactly this is, but I found the LinkedIn profile of a former Qualcomm employee now working at Nvidia, currently working on the memory management unit and the cache TLB for an unannounced Nvidia CPU core. Considering this employee's skills and his past at Qualcomm, who have long abandoned the server market, it's likely that this is referring to an ARM-based client CPU. And of course AMD, the other x86 powerhouse, has also been rumored to be building an ARM-based SoC, as previously reported by Semi-Accurate, perhaps building on the work that Jim Keller did while he was at the company. So that's everyone that matters in the PC business building ARM chips, but Intel thinks this is insignificant and not a threat to their dominance in PCs. This has all the makings of another huge mistake from Intel. Microsoft's exclusivity deal with Qualcomm ends in 2024, so I expect a bunch of announcements before 2025 for a slew of ARM chips from AMD, Nvidia, Qualcomm, and maybe others that will flood the market, with the next version of Windows offering better native ARM support than ever, and with application developers looking to tap into this new trend, particularly with new AI-driven technologies as a catalyst. That's just over a year from now, and there's no way Intel will be able to respond in such a short period of time. This could mean serious trouble for the Blue Giant. One thing's for sure, it's going to be a bright future for consumers, with a healthy landscape of ARM-based manufacturers all competing for our dollars, and a more flexible and connected ecosystem, similar to Apple's but with a bit less dodgy practices. Is x86 finally going to be dethroned? Let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and until the next one.